Hello, this is Joe Neville. Welcome to VLAN Config. This is the third video in my new series looking at Python and ArubaOS-CX. In this video, we're going to first look at Swagger to help build the REST calls that we need for VLAN Config. Then we're going to write a Python script. Quick recap: ArubaOS-CX, new OS, REST API. That's what you need to know. Here's the aim for the script. Log in, get the VLAN table, configure a VLAN, and then log out. It's going to be all API thriller and no CLI filler, except for when I prove it to you via the CLI. Here I am on the Swagger UI of an Aruba 8400. I've already logged in to save time. If you're not sure of how I did that, you need to watch my previous video, link on the screen now. So let's have a look at VLAN. Let's expand that. Now what we need to do is to get the URL to get the VLAN table to find out what VLANs are on the box. So it's like a show VLAN. So there you can see it's the suffix is going to be this system bridge VLANs. Okay, if we run that, now what I'm going to do as well, you see this depth here. So depth, you can actually get more information. So it goes from 0 to 3. I'm going to use a depth of 1 to get a bit more info about the VLANs. I'll show you what that will provide us. If we scroll down, there's a lot of detail in this one, so it's quite a way to scroll. There's our responses. Okay, so there's our submit. Okay, so let's do that again. Right, and if we see at the bottom here, you've got all of this information. So a lot of information about the VLANs on the box. What we're looking for is the name. The name there is the VLAN 104 and the ID. So if I scroll up, we'll see the ID. Okay, so 104. Okay. Now, there's a lot of information there, and it is difficult to manage if you're looking at the Swagger UI, but obviously when you look at this within the code and you use Python to pick out the information that you need, it's actually pretty easy to manipulate this JSON response. Okay, so that's the VLAN table for us. Now, if we scroll down, so if we want to create a VLAN, as we're going to do, to create a new entity on the switch, that's a post. Okay, so a post call to the switch, there we'll use that suffix of system bridge VLANs. Now I did show this in the previous video, so I won't go into too much. The thing that we need to include is the data, and it's the mandatory variables are the name and the ID. So the way that I showed you last time is that we tap on here and that will fill this part in, and I delete the variables that I do not need. So the string, I'm going to call it PyVLAN20, and I need to scroll up to ID. Okay, so this is a bit tricky, but there we go. We are 20. Okay, good stuff. Let's tidy that up. Make sure to get rid of any of those trailing commas there and close it up. Right, so if I send that, it should configure VLAN 20 on the box. Okay, so if I submit that, there we go. So we've got the response code of 201. Now the information that we're really looking for is the URL there that we sent it to. But more importantly as well, we need to include this data. So you see that -d in the curl, you've got the ID of 20, and then you've got the name of PyVLAN20. Okay, so that's a dictionary there. You've got the curly brackets, and we've got the ID, we've got a string of ID, then we've got so that's the key, then we've got the value, that's an integer of 20, and the next part, the key of a string of name, and the value is the PyVLAN, so that the actual name that we've got in there. So that's what you would note down, and you would move over to Python to do that. So let's hop over to the switch, first of all, because I want to delete that off so we can do it again. here I am on the CLI of my 8400. Do a show VLAN, and there's my VLAN 20 that I configured just now. So let's delete that off. Not configured. Okay, good. So now we'll hop over to PyCharm to configure that via the API using Python to send the REST call. Okay, here I am in PyCharm. Now I'm going to run this like I did the last video. So over on the right here, I have a template that can be used for my final code. I think it is actually the final code that I'm going to fill out. And over on the left, what I'm going to do is step by step, I'm going to go through so to pick out the salient points for you and to then run this script. Okay, so the finished product's over here on the right. And this is, over on the left, this is actually the template from my last video. So this is to log into the device. So yeah, I really think you need to be watching the previous video to really get to grips with what's going on here, first of all. But just to recap, what we do is last time, all we did was log in and then log out with a couple of print statements. So to configure the VLAN, obviously what we need to do is we need to log in. Then we need to configure the VLAN. I'm going to print the VLAN table to the screen to show you that I have correctly configured the VLAN, and then I'm going to log out. You always have to remember to log out. So essentially, as the Python script will run top to bottom, what we need to do is we need to put the configuration and the get of the VLAN table between this login print and that logout print. Okay, so first of all, let's create that space there. So that's where I'm going to configure it. Right. But going from top to bottom, okay? First of all, for this, we're going to need another import. Now, I don't need that pretty print at this stage, but I do need to import JSON. So let's put that in. Then we've got those warnings. Okay, should be fine. Right, then we've got those warnings. The next part is the username and the password. Fine. So we've got these global variables. This is the base URL, and then depending on the call that we would have picked up from Swagger, that suffix that was being shown, that's what we will add onto the base URL for our different calls. Now there's a couple of other global, because this is just a kind of quick and dirty tutorial for you. I've got some global variables for the VLAN. So the VLAN ID and the VLAN name, I'm just going to include it here. So this is pretty inefficient, but this is just to show you how you might build your first Python script to do some configuration on this operating system. So VLAN ID, that's going to be 20. VLAN name is going to be, let's call it like I did with a Swagger. Okay, so right, that needs to be a string. So let's make sure I get that in there. Okay, good. Right, now next up we've got the credentials. Fine, we'll leave that. Well, the next interesting part for us, so the credentials, obviously that's going to be your username and your password dictionary that you need to pass in. Now the VLAN data, that's also a dictionary. So what we do is we create a Python object, and this is going to be the data that we're going to feed into the REST call. So to try and make that clear, I've called it VLAN data. It's going to be a dictionary. So these are the mandatory pieces of data that are required to create the VLAN. So it's the ID, and then I'm going to use that VLAN ID object from above. So there's my key and my value. And then we have the key of name. And I'm going to use that VLAN name. There we are. Okay, good stuff. Right, so this is my VLAN data dictionary. Includes this information, the integer and the string for me to build my VLAN. Right, next up we're creating the request session. So using the request third-party library, which handles the REST calls and the responses for us, and it will load the cookie between our calls. So I've imported that there at the top. Okay, next up we are on the login. Fine. And then I'll print to the screen to make sure that we're okay with our login. Right. Next up, what I want to do, so I'm going to slightly change it from my template, because actually what I want to do is I want to configure the VLAN on the box first, and then I'm going to print to the screen. So the configuration, I'll call it like I have in the template there, VLAN conf. So create an object for that, so that there's something there so that there's a Python object that can handle the response. Because you can just do an s.post and configure the box, but it's nice to be able to handle the status code of that. So what I do is I create a Python object that I can then query afterwards, which will handle the response from the switch. So it's s.post and the base URL. There we are. And I want to add to the string that suffix. So what I'll do is I'll just copy it across. So this is what we would have got off of Swagger. So it's the System Bridge VLANs. Okay, close that off. And now this is the data part that's going to be included. So what we do is it needs to be dumped in as JSON. So what I'll use, that's why I've imported JSON at the top there. So I do a JSON.dump, and I can put in my dictionary there. Okay, so this VLAN data that I've got up here, I can just add that in as JSON into my REST call. Okay, so we put in VLAN underscore data. Okay, so good. That's our data part that we're going to include. So that's where we send the post to this URL, and then we pack it with the information that we require to be configured on the box. So that's our data part. Okay, then we've got that verify equals false. And I'll put a timeout equals 2. Close that off. Okay, so hopefully that will be correct, isn't it? I'm not seeing any warnings there. And what I want to do, so that part that I mentioned about it's nice to see the status code. So as I mentioned, this is just quick and dirty in the lab. Like if you were going to do any proper error checking, you might want to print different messages based upon the different status codes that come back to error for you, or to just confirm that everything's okay. So the status code that we'd expect for a post is a 201, which tells you you've successfully posted to the switch in this case. Right, so that will be our configuration part. Now the next step, as I mentioned, is going from on a simple script like this, it's going to run from top to bottom. So we want to log in, configure the device, print that status code to screen. And then what I want to do is I just want to get the VLAN table, so the new VLAN table. Hopefully it will have our configured VLAN in there. I'm going to get that, and then I'm going to print it to screen. So that's the next line. So again, I create an object to handle the response, because then the response will contain the JSON for the VLAN table. So obviously I want to then if I want to print that, I need an object that's going to store it. So I'll do an s.get there, remember, because we're getting information. So it's base URL, the suffix is this one here. I'll just copy it across. Remember that I said I liked to grab a bit more information from the standard depth. So I've gone for depth 1 there. Let's grab that, copy that across. Okay, as you can see, so I've got the suffix there, so system, bridge, VLAN, so it's question mark depth equals 1. So you can put in, if you leave this off, if you just end with VLANs, it will give you depth of the default, which is 0, so the least amount of information. And you can go up, so it's 4 levels, so if you can go 1, 2, or 3 to get some further information there. Okay, so I'll stick with 1. This is a bit repetitive of what I've already done, so I'll just copy this boilerplate across. Okay, good stuff. I've got a double, right. Good. Okay. Now the next part is, so what that will do is that the JSON includes a lot of information. So what I actually want to do is I just want to kind of emulate the CLI here. So the great thing about the API is that you're kind of you get a lot of information back, but it can be slightly overwhelming for the first time users. So it's a good idea to try to just pick out the information that you want. Obviously, this isn't the kind of thing that you would normally do via the API. If you just wanted to look at the VLAN table, you would just use the CLI. As a human, you would just use the CLI. So this is very much what we are saying. We're not saying that CLI is dead. Of course not. Most network engineers, if they were going to quickly query a device, they would just use the CLI to get that information, because it gives them the information that they're expected in an easy to read format. The thing about the API is that if you were going to build anything to interact with the device programmatically, the API is much better for that, because then you can get that structured data that's coming back from the JSON and you can do logic checks on it. Okay, so it's a bit dumb what I'm doing here, to be honest, because I'm just taking all of the power of the API and then essentially just printing the small part that I need to the screen. But as I say, just for illustrative purposes for you. So please bear with me. Right, now what I am going to do then is a for loop. Okay, so I'm going to do for v in the get JSON. So it's the get VLAN JSON that is returned. Okay, because I want, so you get all of the VLANs have their set information within the JSON, and what I want to do is just pick out the variables that I desire and then print those to the screen, of course. So what I'm going to go for is the basics is the name and the ID. So I have a for loop that will print to screen, and I'm going to use, so this string will be printed, so in capitals I've got name, and then a colon with a space, so it's nicely aligned, and I'm then going to use the string format. Okay, so this will print the relevant data from the JSON to the screen. Now this essentially, what I'm doing here with the format is I am left justifying, what this means is that I am left justifying, that's actually the default, but it's the left justifying the data and creating a field size of 15 spaces. That's so that it's nicely laid out in the string. And I'll go for an ID and do the same there essentially. Left justify 15. There we go. I experimented around a bit with that beforehand, and that to me looked like the best way to present it. So this is the string format command there, and what I want to pick out, so in V what I'm doing is I'm calling the name data here. So I'm calling it by the key in the JSON. So I'm calling the name. So what will print to screen is the name. So that's V, and it's square brackets to call the name. So it's the standard way to call the value of a dictionary via the key. Right, V name and then colon. So the name will be, because it's part of the format here, the first one here in the curly brackets, that will be the V name in the loop, and then the second will be the V ID. This is really just so that it looks nice on the screen, to be honest. I could probably do a whole video just on the string format because there's quite a lot to it. I'll put a link to in the description to the Python documentation for string format, because it is very useful for this kind of thing if you want to print stuff to the screen, because with the alignment and the different lengths of the keys and the values that you will receive, it can look quite awkward. But getting to grips with the format command is really useful. Okay, so I think that looks okay. That's my for loop, and then what we have next is the logout. Okay, and I'm going to print to the screen to log out. So you've always got to remember to log out so that you don't exhaust the supply of the sessions that can be on the box. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I think I don't have any warnings, so let's jump over to the box there. Okay, so as I said, no VLAN 20 on the box. I will run the script. Okay, so this is me on my Linux CLI, and the script title is VLAN_config1. So Python 3, of course, and let's run VLAN config1. Okay, so we have to enter the username and the password. Get the cookie up. Okay, so what happened there is we've got the cookie printed to the screen. So this is from my template before. I logged in successfully. Maybe I should have done a string around that one, but essentially I got a 201. So the 201 relates to my configuration of my post. There's a status code from there, and if you look down you should see a VLAN 20 in there. There we go. Pi VLAN 20 with the ID of 20 there. So then I logged out, so my status code being 200. Let's configure another VLAN then, because I want to slightly adapt that so that it actually tells us on the screen, makes it more obvious. Okay, so what we'll do is let's get rid of, so we'll off-road it and we'll get rid of the cookie there, printing to screen, because I think that was a bit superfluous. Let's go VLAN 21. Okay, and we will print, which one is it? So it's the post there. What I will do, try a new line, and I'm going to create a string for this, and I'm going to say okay, so let's run it again. So hopefully this is going to work first time. Okay, there we go. So you can see the status code at the top of 201. You can see my old VLAN and you can see my new VLAN, and we logged out. So there we go. So I adapted that on the fly, first take. Okay, so this is what we just did. We logged into Swagger. We got the API calls that we require for the get of the VLAN table and for the post of a new VLAN. Then we moved over to Python. Created from my template, I created a new script for the log in, I configured a VLAN, and then I got the VLAN table, printed that to screen and logged out. And because I didn't like the way that it was presenting it, I configured another VLAN, VLAN 21, and I printed that to the screen. So thus the workflow is Swagger, Python, and then you run it, okay? Now, coming up, as you saw, there's quite a bit of repetition in there. The script that I was running from top to bottom is quite quick and dirty, quite inefficient. What I'll be doing is I'll be moving from that type of script and moving towards the don't repeat yourself approach, using functions to run the different actions within the script for me. But that's it for this video. I hope you found it useful. Please do like, comment, share and subscribe. But that's all for now. My name's Joe Neville. Thank you and goodbye.